Do you struggle with negative thoughts? We all have them, but how do we actually transform our thinking to be more helpful than hurtful in our everyday lives? Hello, hello, hello. Happy Monday. How y'all doing? How y'all feeling? Excited to be here.
Yes, welcome to Carlie's Couch. We have another good episode for you today that's kind of going through some things that we've been thinking about and also kind of connects to some of the last episodes that we've been having. Um, Carlie, tell us why we want to talk about negative thoughts, right? We talked about positive thinking a couple of weeks ago. So what makes this so different outside of just the opposite of that episode?
Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, we talked about toxic positivity and the problems with trying to force everything in your life to feel good and to be good, and how that can actually do a lot more harm than good. Like, although it's great to have a positive mindset, it's bad to try to force things in your life to be anything. And that actually kind of coincides with last week's episode about detachment. Today's episode is actually a framework to help you dissect your own negative thoughts and get to the root of like our own suffering. Like, there's a quote like, our thoughts are not facts, and just a way to kind of explore them. And I wanted to talk about this because last week, I noticed that I was stuck in this loop of negative thinking. And as someone who, does the work, like I go to therapy, I journal, I do all the things that I need to do to stay self regulated. I notice that still sometimes I have these negative thoughts that come up and make me feel really bad. And I, like mid snowball with negative thoughts down here, I was like, man, I really want to, learn how to challenge these in addition to the ways we've already talked about. Like, we had Steve on here talking about imposter syndrome and presenting opposite evidence, whenever you're having these thoughts that they'll tell you you're not enough. But like, what if that doesn't work? Or what if I tried that and it just doesn't feel authentic? Like, how can I really explore these negative thoughts? And so synchronistically, I was listening to a podcast, Lewis House Full of Greatness, with Dr. Daniel Amen. And he actually brought up this framework we're going to talk about today. It's called The Work, and it's 5 questions by Byron Katie, who's an author and a speaker in the like self-help space. And so it was helpful for me. I shared it with a friend and I was like, man, I'm trying to share it with the Bouch.
Mhm, mhm. Before we go into, what they were talking about in the podcast, while you were just kind of giving that intro there, it made me think like negative thoughts are natural. And I mean, we're not going to always think positively. And of course, because we're such emotional creatures, like we are going to have those thoughts sometimes. At what point is it something that we need to address? Because I don't necessarily think just because you're like, oh man, I'm looking a little extra big today, or like, every little thought is like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I don't think you need to necessarily break down everything or try to be aware of every little thing. But at what point do you think that, having negative thoughts is something to address?
I think that you need to address your negative thoughts more seriously whenever it starts to impact your day, meaning that, like, you feel like you're unable to show up as your best self for work, or you start feeling really lethargic, like you don't want to go do your workout. Like, whenever it starts impacting your emotions on such a high level that you're not showing up or not able to show up as your best self, like, it's a big deal. Because our thoughts can cause suffering. We're the only animal in the whole world that can convince our brain that something is happening when it's not. And that starts to weigh on you. So anytime that you really start to feel that heaviness, like for me, it's like, okay, we all have negative thoughts all the time, cool. But whenever it starts to make me like seep into other areas of my life, I start to feel real sad and just carrying it around all day. Like, when I notice that I'm carrying them throughout the day, that's probably a sign that you should stop and examine them.
hmm Yeah, that makes sense. And I've experienced that as well, where it's like sometimes it just like affects your whole day. Once you kind of get into like the spiral of thinking a certain way or thinking about a thing. Um, but also I feel like when that happens, a lot of times it is around like something specific happening in life or within a relationship or um, a scenario at work or somewhere. And so, is there any difference you think in, the things that are happening day to day and and or just being like a person or like living a life where it's just like, no matter what's going on, like you just tend to like fall into that trap.
If I understand correctly, like I think, we can't stop situations from happening that kind of, suck or whatever sometimes and are impactful. But I like I said, I think it's important whenever they start to really weigh on you and impact everything else in your life is whenever it needs to
Mhm.
be examined. Like you don't always have to be okay. You don't always have to
Yeah.
feel good and not like that's that toxic positivity, like not allowing yourself to have those emotions. But
Hmm, hmm, hmm.
to the extent that it starts to affect the rest of your life, like I think that's time. Like you can't control
And
what's
I
going
guess,
on. It's okay to be sad, but mhm.
I guess a better question would have been like these exercises for all of those things, or is this like for a particular, being in a particular space or having particular type of negative thoughts or something like that?
Great question. So I think I'm still newer to this, and so y'all work with me as I'm talking through this today. Just learned it this week, but I think it's in those moments, like whenever you start to feel overwhelmed or when it is affecting your day. So specifically, that's what it worked for me.
Hmm,
Like whenever
hmm,
your everyday upkeep, self care and mental health activities are not working, and you feel yourself careening downhill, like this might be a thing to help you stop spiraling. It might not. For other people, this might be something you use to help you level up to the next level in your career, if you find yourself like having a barrage of negative thoughts
hmm,
there. But for me, I would say this is like whenever I'm about to be mid spiral, I can see myself doing this to like catch myself.
hmm, hmm. Okay.
Yeah. And do we want to talk through the questions first or do we just want to go through an exercise and then talk about them?
Well, let's do go through it, I guess. What are some examples of negative thought? I get, yeah, I want to like talk about like what are the examples of like types of negative thoughts you would do this with. And then we can go through, maybe choose one of those examples and then go through to
Okay.
see like how you would do this exercise.
Okay, cool. I'm like, man, actually, we be putting everything in the notes in our phone. I'm like, let me find one of my thoughts that I was going through. Okay. Um, should I have this ready? I guess I can just go off the top of my head. So I did have a situation happen where I got triggered, and led to a little dispute with someone I'm dating, and I started to feel a type of way afterwards, which is fine, like it's okay. But then I noticed like I was like real sad and didn't do the stuff I needed to do, Sunday night. And then the next day I kind of woke up sad and I was like, man, like what's going on? And so I was having feelings of, oh man, I feel rejected. I feel like I'm too much. I feel like, he's going to abandon me. I feel like I messed up and that he doesn't see me. I feel unappreciated. So I was having all the feelings. Um, and, most of them are my own and have nothing to do with said person. But that's when I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is a good thing to go through. So those are some of the ones that I explored with the 5 questions.
Hmm. So your negative thoughts in this example were kind of anxiety about what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay. Let me think of a couple examples too, because I think I recognize that a lot of your examples tend to be around you having feelings around other people or like what that makes you feel as far as what's happening in a relationship, any type of relationship, like family, friends, whatever. Um, but I think also about like negative thoughts around stuff like I can't handle something, like maybe like, oh man, I can't handle work, or I'm not going to be able to do something. Um, there's also negative thoughts around, um, hmm, actually, and then even with those are around your capabilities, right?
Hmm.
Um, what are some other examples of negative thoughts that could kind of show like maybe a different kind of like a different category or like angle of what people may be thinking about? I don't, is it negative thoughts when it's like things that you have to deal with, like negative thoughts when it's like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills this month or stuff like that? Or is that
Well, for
just,
me, I was about to say for me, maybe not that, but maybe a play on that. Like, so the trigger could be like, oh man, I don't know how I'm gonna pay my bills. But then the thoughts that kind of come from that, where, man, I'm not good with money. I'm always messing up with money, or I need to do better. I'm not doing enough. Um, then I was just thinking of other things that could happen, like maybe victim thoughts, like you
mm-hmm,
feel like you're always on the receiving end, like, man, they always give other people the promotion, I'm always getting overlooked. That might be another thought, like people don't appreciate the value that I bring. or
mm-hmm,
or if you show up to like maybe a social situation, like, oh man, I wish I was. Well, that's not a negative thought. I'm not good at talking to people. People don't understand my energy. I don't know. I was trying to think of something like maybe in a social
mm-hmm,
situation.
mm-hmm. No, I think all of those make sense. Guess I just want to clarify like what types of things fit here, because I think sometimes too you don't really, I don't want to say you don't recognize what thoughts are negative, but I think it's not always like very black and white. Like we're thinking things, and it's not so much as like a direct negative thought as much as if you really looked at it, you are kind of like limiting yourself. So it's just definitely not necessarily positive, if that makes sense. Um, like you might not be saying like I'm so stupid every day. Like it might not be that direct, but um it may be, it may be kind of hidden.
Yeah, and I think they do. I think it is more of the underlying beliefs. And we did a whole episode about rumination. And so I think that this is a
Hmm.
good thing whenever you find yourself ruminating on a subject and like really just stuck in it, or if you notice that it's a pattern. So if at every job you go to, you feel like you're getting overlooked for a promotion because people suck and are manipulative and are, whatever towards you, like, if it's every job, then that might be a time to look at yourself.
Hmm. Okay. And also I think it's important to point out, when we're going through this exercise and answering these questions about the negative thought, shouldn't we, do you agree or disagree, shouldn't we make sure that the actual thought that we're addressing is the one that has to do with us? And for example, if, oh man, he's going to abandon me, like that's not, I mean, maybe that is what the question is, or is the question around like how you feel about the thing? Like you
Well,
can't
so
answer the questions about another person, if that makes sense. That's what I'm kind of trying to get to.
well, I think that you can almost start, and I could be wrong, but I think you could almost start with any thought and it will
Hmm. Hmm.
inevitably lead you back to yourself and the underlying belief that you're struggling
Okay,
with you. So it seems like it's him or her or whomever they, but then it always comes back to like your real rooted belief in yourself that you need to fix, or heal, not fix, but heal.
got it. Okay, well, let's take one of these and go through and see how it works out.
Okay. Did you want to do a work one or a self one, or you just want me to pick one?
Let's pick one of the ones that you said, or let's both have a different one, and then we can maybe go through.
Yeah,
Um,
I like that. Mm, I'm trying to find. I had a whole little write out on this joint.
the one I would go through, that would be kind of applicable for me is, um, but I mean, this isn't really what I'm thinking right now exactly, but um,
Yeah, this is just for experience purposes.
maybe I know, maybe something like I have so much to do, I'm never gonna get it done, like something like that. Does that, maybe that counts?
Yeah,
Because
let's
I
try it.
am like in real life, I am dealing with the stress of having like a zillion things on my plate, and I I don't know. While I feel the stress of it, I don't know if that's what I'm telling myself exactly. Like, I don't know if I'm telling myself I can't do it. What I keep saying is, "Ugh, I have a lot, I have a lot, I have a lot." And maybe that's negative. I don't know if that's negative or not. Um, but that's what I keep, like, I have a lot. I'm just, like, so tired. But I don't necessarily say like I can't do it or it won't get done or whatever. But maybe I'm worried about it getting done.
Yeah, I mean, and that could be the thing. Maybe, you can pick whichever one you want. But maybe the thought is like, "Man, I have so much stuff. I'm worried I'm never going to get it done," which is essentially like what you started with, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um,
And then what's yours?
Mine is, um, let's see, if don't do that one. I just say, okay, I am not lovable. What's
Is that
that one?
really what you be thinking? Poor thing.
Sometimes.
And not to, no, and I'm not even trying to dismiss it. But it's like, damn. We say I am not lovable, and what?
Mhm. No, that's it.
Or that's just
Yeah,
it.
just that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
I think no, and actually, I've thought that before. Again, I think what makes it like, damn, sometimes it's like just to say it straight out like that because while that's, I feel like I would never do like, I am not lovable, but that's what you're saying. You're thinking about what is like in line of like actions and things you say or how you act sometimes when um you are like in a space like you're always trying to prove yourself or trying to do too much and get somebody's attention or whatever it might be like
Mhm.
that may be the underlying thing. And maybe you're just at a space where it's like very clear to you to just get straight to it with what is that underlying thought.
And but say, yeah, maybe that's a good thought. So maybe because I've only discovered that that's something I struggled with through therapy and all that stuff. So maybe the thought, like one of the thoughts that leads to that, one of the more like top level thoughts would be like, I'm too much.
Mm.
So maybe I'll just say I'm too much.
And as in like oh, I'm too needy type of thing.
Yeah, like I'm too needy, I'm too
Hmm.
emotional, I'm too sensitive.
Okay. And even that probably comes from what somebody else is not doing, or doing.
Yep. Okay. So we have our two thoughts. So I have so much to do, I'm never going to get it done. And I'm too much, I'm too needy, too emotional, too sensitive. Okay. So question one, you have your thought. Is this true? This question can change your life. So take a moment, be still, and ask yourself if what you thought. And she recommends to journal this so you can write it down so you can actually
Hmm.
see it. Um, what you wrote down is true. Is it true?
Just straightforward answer that.
Yep.
Is it true? Yes, I do have so much to do. I'm never going to get it done is not true.
Okay. Can you know that it is not absolutely? Oh, let me do mine. Is it true? I'm too much, too needy. I mean, maybe, sometimes, probably. We'll go with sometimes. And then the question two is, can you absolutely know it's true? This is another opportunity to open your mind and go deeper into the unknown and to find the answers that live beneath like what we think we know about something. So can you know for
Why would
sure
this
that
be
you're
any different from is it true? Like, what's the difference here?
so the difference is like for mine, is it true? Sometimes. Like I could be too needy or too emotional sometimes. But is it
Mm.
absolutely true? No, it's not absolutely true because it's not all the time. It's not a fixed state. That's how I
Oh, so
received it.
absolutely, literally, as in like, is it an absolute?
Yes. Yeah. Is it 100%
Like,
absolutely true?
okay, okay. Um, I know. I get, yeah, same for me, I guess, is that it's not.
Okay. And then the next question, question three is like, how do you react? Like, how do you feel? Like, what happens whenever you believe that thought?
Mhm.
And this question opens up an internal like cause and effect. So you can see that when you start to believe this thought, you notice that you start to feel discomfort, you feel fearful, you feel panic, you start to treat the other person different if it involves it, or you start to be mean to yourself. And so, how do you react whenever you believe this thought? And then, like, how does it make you feel? And she says, make a list and be specific. So, whenever you have all this stuff to do and you think you're never going to get it done, how does that make you feel?
Um, what? So how I react internally is when I'm thinking about what's on my plate or what I need to do, I get very stressed in my body, my chest gets tight. I find myself going in a loop, like a mental loop of the to-do list or the things and trying not to forget stuff, and or I find myself kind of looking at things and it's like in the space of always just trying to sort everything. Um, and how I feel, how do you how do you treat yourself when you believe that thought? Um, and how I feel if I'm thinking about having too much to do or not being able to get it done or just needing to figure out how to get it done, I guess I do start to feel like I want to just distance from everything, or I feel like I want to just quit everything and just not do it, or I start thinking about like, do I even really need to do this? So I kind of feel avoidant probably in general, um, and just am trying to get away from feeling like that overwhelm.
No, that's great. Um, Supplemental question. When you're in that state, do you feel like you can do your best work?
No, but and an easier thing to recognize is that when I am getting things done, I'm not in that state of thinking about not being able to get it done, most likely. But it kind of ebbs and flows. Like there's times where I'm not thinking about it. I have the same amount to do sometimes. I mean, I do have more at times, but there's the weeks where I just tend to attack things and just get it done, and then there's weeks where it's like I don't know. It's like you're just so blown. You also don't move as well in getting it done,
Mhm.
or it's almost like that's just like an extra hoop of thought instead of just like, all right, let me just start and just do a thing. Like it kind of prevents you from like really getting into it the way you need to.
Wow, that's a really good guidance. Thank you. Um, so mine, question three, how would you feel if this thought was true? Like, how do I feel when I believe this thought? It makes me sad. It makes me feel rejected and feel lonely. I start to, get knots in my chest and tenseness in my jaw. Kind of makes me want to cry and not do anything and just lay in bed all day. Um, it starts to affect my relationships because when I'm feeling like that, then my energy is off. So then I'm bringing this, weird energy into my relationships and into my work. And it's a trickle down thought. I get mad at myself whenever I, struggle with these thoughts that I know aren't true, but then that still come up sometimes. Um, and then yeah, it just starts to affect my entire day. So thinking about ripples in a pond,
Mhm.
it just spreads out into everything else. And so once you have your list and you're pretty specific and explore, what it looks like whenever you believe this thought, the next one is who would you be without this thought? Like if you didn't believe this thought, if you knew it wasn't true at all, like imagine yourself
Mhm.
like in this situation without believing this thought. How would your life be different if you didn't like if this thought couldn't even exist? Like how would you feel if you were in the same situation doing the same things, but this thought was non-existent? Like you knew for certain it like wasn't true, it wasn't a thing, you never had to think about it.
Yeah, that's a good one to think about. You would just, I don't know, I guess in the work example, you would just make the moves you need to make. If it didn't exist that you even thought about having too much, maybe it would have a different perspective of um, just getting the things done, coming at it from a perspective of, um, okay, let's be excited about what there is to get done today or whatever the project actually is. And being maybe more into the work or into the project more than like being upset about having to do the work or project. Um, and then it just probably getting done.
And then which do you prefer? Like a life with this thought or without it? And then which feels more peaceful?
Oh, it definitely feels more peaceful to not have that thought, right? To not think about things as like piling up or think about what you have to do in that way.
Hmm. And so mine, who would I be without this thought? I would be able to be more present in my relationships because I wouldn't be worried about how I'm showing up or that people are going to reject me if I show up as my full self. Like if I
Mm,
feel like I'm too much or too sensitive, I would also not be able to be vulnerable with people. And so if that thought didn't exist, I would be able to have, deeper, more vulnerable, more honest and authentic relationships. I would be myself and unapologetically, which feels really nice and not worrying about or giving a fuck what other people think. And it feels so much more peaceful. I'm much kinder to myself in that version of my life where I don't struggle with those thoughts. Yeah, yeah, if they just didn't exist, life would be, life quality would improve. And
mm.
so um that's the fourth question. The last one, oh, go ahead.
I'm gonna type something down about that though. I'm gonna type something down about that we can come back to after we do the fifth question though.
Okay, cool. So the fifth question is it's called a turnaround. And what that means is like, how do you turn this thought around? Turnarounds are potent perspective shifts that can bring you right into the heart or the thoughts of judgments that cause suffering. They are an inquiry of the truth behind the exact opposite of a thought. And this is because disappointments are always created internally. Like we always create the disappointments and the dramas and stuff inside of ourselves. And the more you understand this, the more you understand that your external environment is just a reflection of you and how you're feeling. And so the turnaround just gives you an opportunity to experience the opposite of what you believe. And this is the kind of the one that's like harder for me to understand. That's why I said, bear with me. I'm just thinking through it. But where did my note go? Here we go. Yeah. So taking the original thought and turning it on the opposite and just asking yourself, now, is this true? So, for example, Lex, on your thought, it is, I have so much to do, I'm never going to get it done. So, how I would flip that for you and then ask you if it's true, like you always have a lot to do and you always get it done. Is that true?
Mm, at some point, yes,
Do you have any evidence that you usually get things done,
yes.
even when you're feeling like you don't?
Even when I'm feeling like I don't get them done.
Yeah, you are, even whenever you're having these thoughts and feeling like you're not ever going to finish them.
Yeah, usually the things that need to get done, or if it gets done later, I mean, it still just gets done.
And then does this thought help you? Like the thought of you never being able to get it done, does that help you at all?
No, it doesn't
And
necessarily lead to any progressive movement.
and then does it help you get what you want having that thought?
No.
So those are some, like that was how the guy on Dr. Daniel Amen like talked through it on Lewis's podcast, and I found that very helpful. When I started to
Mhm.
actually read about the turnaround, I got a little bit more confused because in her example, she says take your thought and then give three turnaround like exact opposite. So for mine, I would say I'm not too much. I'm just enough. I don't really know how to do the opposite of my negative thoughts, which is why I like thinking about if you just believe the opposite, what does that look like in your life? Does it help you? Do you have examples for it?
Wait, so you're saying you can't do the I'm too needy one? Turn it around?
Yeah, I was gonna say what I don't, to me, I don't really know like a turnaround thought that I'm not needy, that I don't, that I, just have, I have an
No.
just enough
So I think
sensitivity.
actually I think yours is a good example, right? Of we don't have what is negative and what is positive. To say I'm too needy, what's negative about that is that you are penalizing yourself for your needs. So you don't have to be like I'm not needy because you do have needs, right? So that's where kind of like with some of that it's like I don't know, it's the negative thought is you feeling like these are too much or that they cannot be handled by somebody, as opposed to turning that around is more of a shift internally, probably to say, hey, I have these particular needs, and that can be met by me and the right person. And I think like what I was just jotting down after that fourth question is thinking about the fact that sure, we can say things like, oh, talk about how life could be better without that thought of feeling like, oh, I'm too needy or I'm too much or whatever. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the situation that led you to thinking that or fed you let allow to feed that thought doesn't actually exist. And so sometimes it's beyond you thinking a thing, right? You can be like, no, actually, you know what? My needs are okay. And maybe this person is not the right person who can meet them. And so that's different, right? Where we have to still think about like in real life, what does that mean for what we need to do in our situations so that we're not always in the same spiral of a person triggering those thoughts because you're always going to still get triggered. It doesn't matter how much you go through these like exercises and questions if you got to do them every other day because of that same situation.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So like at
Yeah.
what point do you process like what you really need to do about your life situations? And even with mine, like I've been traveling for the last week and I haven't been able to move through works, which is why it's also piling up. And while there may be a reason for that, and folks are like, okay, yeah, we understand. I know also this week is going to be like, okay, so now I have to double up or figure out how to get all those things still done. While they may have given me a day or whatever, the stuff still needs to get done. And so it's still like, okay, how do you actually resolve the situation in a way where, hey, maybe the problem is we need to remove these particular things from around us that are causing you to doubt yourself because there are people who you can have in your life. You can have different friends, different relationships, different whatever, who will support what you do need if you acknowledge and if your turnaround is perhaps understanding what you need and being okay with that.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really great question and great perspective. And also just a great reminder is like no matter how much self-work you do, like the people around you really matter. Like you can be healed and be gaslit by, someone having you thinking, crazy stuff. And so being very aware of those situations around you. But I think the idea of this is not is to help you realize your own part in all of these situations. And I copied an example from an article I was reading about it because the way they took the person through it, the original thought was, in order for me to be happy, I need Lyle to admit that he hurt and betrayed me, and I need him to offer an apology. That was her thought. I need
Mhm,
this, otherwise, I'm not going to be happy. At the end, she
mhm,
realized, man, I need to admit, because he left her. That was the beginning of the story, is that her husband left her, like he left. And so,
mhm,
in order for her to be happy in her head, she know that she was like, man, I need him to apologize. At the end, she realized, like, man, I need to admit that I'm hurting myself every time I ruminate about him, and instead of
mhm,
waiting for him to apologize, maybe I need to apologize to myself for what I've been doing to me and move on. And
mhm.
it's like, okay, so this
That's
can be used.
exactly what I go through, or with everything, right? Like, because you're right. You have to understand like your part in it, and not even your part in anything that happened. Because we went to what you just said. It's not your part in what happened. It's your part in how you move forward. Because I think we feel like we need a certain closure around certain things, um, and you really have to just do that yourself. I really like that example a lot. And one before it slips my mind, what I've been thinking about lately is like between in a relationship, right? To the thought of, or what the thought I've been flipping, instead of thinking about a relationship that didn't work as, oh, well, he's this and he's that. And like, it's easy to say like things about the other person or even things about yourself too. But then I've started changing it to make it like, how can I make it less negative versus positive? Because it's not that, right? It only feels like that for you. But how can you make this a statement that is just like, it is what it is? So, for example, instead of it being like, well, he didn't want to do this or he did that or whatever, the statement can be more so, hey, the things that I desire and the things that I want, um, and the things that you want and the things that you offer just aren't aligned. So like in a way, it's like it's okay if you want to do if you're looking for a certain whatever, even though you might think like, ooh, so you want to have talk to 20 women and blah, blah blah, like you might judge that, but instead of judging, it's like, okay, if that's what they want to do and that's what they want to do. And being able to be okay with statements like that, that's what helps me be okay with certain types of statements, to say like, you want this and I want that, and they're just not the same, instead of it being like you're wrong, or I should get a thing, or you didn't do this for me, or you don't want to do a thing for me. Like, no, they don't. But that's, you know, it's only hurting yourself, and it's only not okay when you're trying to force it to be something else.
Yes. And I think that's the purpose of this exercise in general is to help us get to a better thought and to kind of change
Hmm.
the attachment to the negativity, because like brains, our brains really be trying to help us. Like they're always trying to find a solution, they're always trying to justify things, but we don't realize that sometimes we have, these deeply rooted negative beliefs, and or we're looking for, solutions and things that we can't possibly understand with other people. Like,
Hmm.
homegirl's looking for him, because he left. She's like, oh man, it's my fault. I did all this. It might not have anything to do with her, but her brain is trying to make sense of things. And so we get stuck in those loops of trying to fix it. When in reality, it's like, I love how you mentioned it's just us and our thoughts and how we choose to move forward. Like, what are we going to do with those thoughts? And so I think this is a great way to help you flip those thoughts and not so much focus on, what was lacking or what wasn't there, or the differences, and just moving forward in what you want and your concept of self and what you need and what you desire.
Yeah, and I think with like negative thinking too, it's just really important to catch catch like when you're really just trying to own somebody else's problems or issues as well, or like, if the negative thought has to do with other people or how something else or somebody else makes you feel. um I think sometimes we just hold on to other people's stuff a little bit more than we need to, or what we think that says about us, as opposed to just being like, uh no, this is what I want is this, and or what I need is this, and that's okay. Like, it doesn't really have to be about the other person.
Yeah, and that delves into like the detachment. Like you want it to work so bad that you keep running
Mhm.
into all of these things where you're misaligned, like wondering why things ain't working out or why you keep coming into the same issues. And it's like there might just be a
Mm.
misalignment. And I also hate the misnomer that like if a relationship doesn't work out, then it wasn't successful. Like you're not meant to do life with everybody forever, like friends, relationships, all of that. And so looking at lessons learned, looking at what's there, and being okay with moving on and getting to what you do want.
Mhm.
Yeah. So um I'll link like Byron Katie in the notes so y'all can actually go do more research. But I think this is a great way to explore negative thoughts. I saw a study that's like we have anywhere from like 15 to 60,000 thoughts a day. And 80% of them are typically negative. And I think after the age of like 34, 35, 95% of them stay the same. And so this is a way to start to challenge those beliefs and start to flip them. Like Lexi said, whenever you notice that you're um too invested into how someone is responding or what you need from them in order to be a certain way, and really centering yourself. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm glad I got to
And I think
share. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think a good exercise for this too, because sometimes it's hard to catch, is to journal. We talked about this before, but I say to journal or write things down, or like in your phone notes, etc. That's what I'll do sometimes. Like when I'm feeling some kind of way, like you can write it how you feel it, but then when you kind of put that down and look at it later, you can, a lot of times you can be like, oh, you know what, like it's easier to kind of flip it when when you're reading it and when you see it, and it gets easier to see patterns. Because one thing I think we do a lot too is, especially if it's about like a relationship or another person, you may be like, oh well, he's um, not doing this or that, or he's not listening to me, or whatever the things are. And what I find sometimes is that I'll go into, um, kind of starting to justify things by like, well, I am kind of doing this, and maybe I need to give him space to do that. And even that's like taking up too much, right? Like you can find yourself being over responsible, where it's like, oh no, scratch all that. Like this wasn't okay, and or whatever, right? Like sometimes we're doing too much, and just trying to like overthink about it. But whatever it is, like that you're having negative thoughts about, just write this stuff down, however you're feeling it. But then you kind of go back later and you can look at it and think about, like these questions, maybe even like what is true here, what is not, and what is a different way to think about all of this in a way where you're not necessarily making anybody a bad guy. Like life is life, people do what they do, um, or with situations with work or whatever. Like you don't have to like make something else the bad guy, and you don't have to be the good guy. and vice versa.
And I think the most important thing is like being honest with yourself. Like I'm embarrassed that I wrote that stuff down. Sometimes when I write how I'm feeling, I go back and look
Hmm.
at it. I'm like, oh my
Me
God, why
too.
was I going through a sad girl? Like, what's going on?
Right, looking weak, right? Yeah, I've done
This
that
shit
too.
weak. Like, why am I? But I think that's important because that gives you a great vantage point of like, damn, I really be there sometimes. And that's okay. Like
Mhm.
not beating yourself up, but it gives you a chance to, grow through that. And the last thing that I'll say from the podcast episode that I really enjoyed is the doctor was saying that everybody inherently is living life for what they want, like, and I mean that can be altruistic and that feels good too, but that's still what you want. Like if you want to help people, that's still something that assages like who you are and you're living life how you want. And so when he added the two questions, like, you know does this thought help me, get what I want, like I think that that's an interesting perspective on Byron Katie's work, because you can really look at like, are you building up your mindset in a way to achieve the life that you want, and are these in alignment with your goals? And so reframing everything. Nobody is a villain. I mean, yeah, whatever. Nobody's really a villain like in your story. It's just like their wants differed from yours, and that's okay to be different, but just refocusing on what you want. So adding, whenever you're thinking through this, like, does this not help me? Like, how does it get me what I want? How can I reframe this to get me what I want?
Mhm.
Yep. So we'll link that in the show notes. Hit us at.
And you know
Oh,
what? Sorry, I know we're trying to end it,
you're
but one
good.
other thing I would like to add is think about who you want to be. Because, for example, when you're reading things that you say and you're like, damn, this is weak. Like, of course, like nobody, like, if that's the person you are, like, that's not attractive to what you want, most likely. And so, like, moving in a space of, in this case, maybe more confidence, or even if your negative thoughts are about yourself, your body, hair, weight, whatever, like to move in a space of confidence or in a different space is what's going to get you feeling better about a lot of those things. So I think you also have to understand like who you want to be, and then like how does that person act, where we've talked about like alter egos and things like that. Like
Mhm.
sometimes that's how you need to step into that to get through with some of this negativity, to kind of show yourself.
And as much as, people be like, fake it till you make it, like, yeah, to a degree, when you're being inauthentic. And also, I'll say, like, a healthy dose of delusion or creating this alter ego is great, because you really can convince your brain that things happen whenever they don't. If you can do it in a bad way in stressful situations, you can do it in a positive way. Like finding one thing you love about your body in front of a mirror every day. Yeah, my toenails is fire, and slowly building up that confidence in
Mhm.
yourself. And I say that as a joke, but I'm serious. That's like a way to start to build those things that you want to see and growing into who you want to be. So the same way that your brain, creates negative, it can also create positive. And so shifting some of that
Mhm.
energy, like, man, today is going to be a
Mhm.
great day. I feel so good about that. I learned this, and kind of talking yourself up as well, as much as you do being down.
Mhm. And about things that are real, not about what's to come. Like when we talked about positive or toxic positivity, like if you're feeling like unlovable, then you can go in and you can actually like think about, the folks who are in your corner, or think about things you love about yourself or whatever. But you don't necessarily have to be like, well, somebody will love me one day. Like you also don't have to do that, because that's still like you attaching the same thing just to another person in the future. If that makes sense. Like you still have to figure out where you can find that, where that opposite feeling can come from, like in the moment.
Hmm. And that's important. That's really how you do it. And don't be embarrassed. Like I feel a part of me even is like, man, y'all don't worry. I don't be thinking like that all the time. But it's okay to feel like that. It's okay to have those negative
Mhm.
thoughts. That's why we're here to work through and grow through them. So don't not do the work because it's embarrassing or it's hard to get through. Like that's how you actually get to the other side.
Mhm.
And then, man, again, no shout out this week. Y'all gotta let us know what y'all working on, so we
Mhm.
can shout you out here. We love shouting out amazing things that you're doing, books that you're writing, companies, all of those things. Hit us up. Let us know at Carlie's Couch. And then the
Oh,
question
I got
of
a
the
shout
week,
out actually. I'm sorry.
yeah,
I
is
keep
that
being
your
all late
homie
today.
who got the seed funding or whatever? No, okay.
No, but I guess we could. We can add that in there. That's not who I was thinking, but that is a good shout out. Donald Boone. He during the pandemic, he started out boxed up, and he went to A&T also, so he's friends with a few of the friends. But It's pretty interesting because he allows people to go to the site and they can purchase like a package where it comes to you. Let's say if you have a podcast or if you need to do an interview or whatever, you can choose the right package you need with the right cameras, lighting, mics, all the things, and they send it to you. So your webinars, your whatever you need to do from home or from wherever are just much more crisp and good and clearer. And it's renting it, and so you're not always having to like buy stuff. So then you get it,
That's cool.
they send you everything, then you send it back. I'd actually used it a couple years ago with one of my clients in DC when we were filming. What was it? It wasn't, yeah, kind of like a course, I guess, but she was doing something around real estate. And so she got the stuff sent to her house. We set it up, did it. So he had all the good cameras and everything. And so, yeah, they have been doing some fundraising, and they have been backed by Slauson and Co. and I think a few other investors as well. So they just raised 2.3, I believe, in funding and probably still growing from there. So shout out to Donald and his team for the work that they're doing there, which goes to show that when you develop a company and a brand around a specific need that you see, it makes life easier for other people. That's always something good to get behind.
So yeah, so check them out. We will link them in the shout out. And yeah, sorry that wasn't who you were thinking about, but I saw that and got so hyped. I was
But
like,
that's
oh,
a good
we
one though.
talking about them. Yeah, that's so cool. And then also shout out to Kareem and Slauson and Co. for investing money in great companies. Then our question of the week this week is: do you have an internal monologue? Lex, do you have an internal monologue?
Of course, I'm always talking, and I'm always, as I'm talking, like judging and assessing those thoughts to try to make them more neutral or make them easier for me to deal with.
Do you hear your voice like in your head or a voice, or do you just have the thoughts?
Just my voice. So it doesn't
Okay.
feel like it's another person in there.
Yeah. Well, I saw a TikTok that this lady like said that not everybody actually has internal monologues. And I did research, and there's like a percentage of the population of people who don't have those thoughts or hear a voice or things in their head. And I think that that's crazy because I do, and I thought everybody did. So I thought it was interesting. But the difference, like I don't hear my voice in my head. It's just like I know my thoughts, but I don't hear my voice. That might sound weird, but yeah, I definitely talk to myself all day. I talk to myself more than I talk to anybody else. In my head and mostly out loud.
I feel like most people do.
But I thought it was interesting to find out that some people actually don't. I didn't even know that was possible. But so everybody was like, so what do you hear? And people on TikTok probably some, fucking around, but we're saying like, oh, I just don't have thoughts in between things that I'm talking. I'm like, that's mind blowing to me.
Yeah, and I wonder if they don't have it or if they're not aware of it per se. Because I know that inner voice is definitely a thing. Like even with Michael Singer, like that's once he realized that he had that voice in his head, like his whole life mission, that's why he started like meditating and living in the woods and all those things, is because his whole mission was like, how do I quiet this voice? And then like of course as he goes through his journey, he recognizes that it's not necessarily about quieting it, but aligning and all the other things, and recognizing who that voice is, which is not necessarily always representative of you, but it's definitely there.
Yeah, I wonder if they just don't have it. And I didn't know that about him, so that's cool. Great ponderances. Hit us at Carlie's Couch. Let us know about your internal monologue, things you might have learned from this episode, and also things you might be interested in hearing or guests you want to see on the couch.
Toodaloo.
Bye, y'all.